Hi, welcome back to the Coding Writer series. Now in this video, I am going to create the register form of the user, and then we are going to create the login functionality and let the user log in to the dashboard. Alright, so first of all, we need to look into the database and see what columns we have. Alright, so we have first name for the users. Previously we had only the name column, so I just separate them on the basis of first name and last name. Then we have email and password. Alright, so if you go to the create one account, I have just renamed them with the first name, last name, email and password only. Alright, so what I need to do is basically I have to make this form functional. So let's go into the register. Let's close everything else that we have right now. And so you can see that this form only has the method post, and there is nothing else in order to prevent this form from CSRF attacks. So CSRF is basically means that if we do not implement any CSRF logic inside this form, so this form can be submitted from anywhere into our website, and that can cause some damage to our databases. All right. So in order to prevent the CSRF protection, what we need to do is basically we have to set up the CSRF tokens. So for that we need to go into the application config and then open the config.php, and inside the config.php search for CSRF. All right. So you can see this CSRF protection by default it's false. We need to set it to true, and we can just setting it to true. The CSRF protection is now working. Now the one more thing that we need to make is the CSRF regenerate. So I don't want my tokens to regenerate on every request, because sometimes request might get failed, and if we come back to the form, so that token will exist there, the previous one, and if this is enabled, and once the second request is placed, it will say that the token is mismatching. So we need to set it to false. You can make it to true if you think that the form will not ever have any fail status. So in my case, this could have a fail status, so I will let the CSRF regenerate to false. And I can also just rename the token to whatever I like. So I say CSRF, let's say, maybe just say it like EMS underscore token underscore name, and then for EMS underscore cookie. All right. Or maybe just remove this name. All right. So if I just reload this page and if I inspect it, I still see that there is no token handling here. And if I submit this form, let's say if I submit this form, all right. So first of all, let's go ahead and make some fields required. The first name is required, the last name is obviously required, and then the email is also required. Just remove these input fields since this is the form validation, but we have not implemented the form validation here. And let's remove these things as well, and this password match, and also make this thing required. All right, so reload the page. First name, let's put in John Smith, jsmith@mail.com, and the password is admin. And if I submit, it will say that the action you have requested is not allowed. Why? It's because the CSRF token, this coordinator framework, this request, we are not sending the CSRF token, and the framework is checking that if that CSRF token is exists. So if it does not, it will show us this error message that the action you have requested is not allowed. So how we can include the CSRF token inside our form? So let me show you. There is one quick way, and if you just Google it on the on Google, let's say CSRF token field in coordinator. So it will give us the input HTML for that to implement in our form. So how we can do is basically just where it is, let me see, this one. So we can just copy this line of code, uh, this one, and we place it here and remove this thing from here to here. All right, now if I just go back, reload the page, and let's say John Smith. All right, so first of all, let's take a look how this looks. First of all, we need to say the name and the hash. All right, so you can see the CSRF EMS token is here and the token value is here. All right, so if I just submit the form once more, at mail.com and the password is this, and everything works fine, except that we are not handling the request right now. One more thing I need to do is basically, instead of just calling this line of code every time in our every form, I will prefer to create the helper functions. Alright, so this is our CSRF general helper function, and what we need to do is basically just call this helper function inside our register method. So instead of this line of code and we have to repeat it every time in our every form, we can just simply replace it with this CSRF helper function. Now this will automatically creates the token function for us right here. All right. So I also need to fill the form fields to the old values. So if the user faces any form validation errors, those fields should automatically get filled with the old values. So for that, what we need to do is basically just go to the form, the value, and echo out set underscore value, and it will accept the key or the field name, which is first name in our case. Then copy this thing, place it here and here. We don't need passwords to be cached, and we have the email here as well. Alright, so let's go ahead and refresh the page, type in this thing, and maybe just this thing. Alright, so we are seeing the old values loaded here. Alright, so what else do I need to do is basically to submit the form, we actually need to have some kind of hidden input field on the basis of which we can judge that the form is submitted. So there are multiple and various ways through which we can submit our form. The first thing is basically we can submit the form to our something else. Let's say we can define the action, and in action, inside the action we can define the controller method. But what I prefer usually is basically to have a hidden input field, like so, input type hidden, and name this thing as the action, and the value will be process account creation. Alright, so once this is configured, this hidden field is implemented and added inside our form. What I usually do is basically, let's go ahead and create another general for helper function for this. So for that, I will say uh, hidden action field, and this action field will obviously accept the value and echo out. Let's say echo out this thing right now. Remove these things, and the value should be should exist inside here. All right, so I will say the value, save it, and just comment this out as hidden form action field. And to call this field, it's pretty simple. I can call it with hidden action field and pass in the value of this one. All right, and how do I get the values inside the controller is basically to just check initially if there is some kind of post request. So if is set $_post action, and $_post action equals to this private. Alright, so what I will do is basically call the function process account creation, like so, and just simply create a function which I prefer to have a private function so that it's only accessible from the class only, not from the directly with the URL. Alright, so what do I need to do is basically set up the first name, last name, email, and password. Alright, so first of all, I need to have some kind of validations. So $this form underscore validation set underscore rules. So inside the rules, the first parameter it will take is the input field name, and the second is the basically return what kind of input field you want to show. So in my case, I want to show that the first name field is required. All right. So the and the third parameter will be the rules that actually we need to pass in. So first of all will be the required, and second I say xss underscore clean. So clean this line of code if there is any cross site scripting errors. So let's go ahead and create for the last name, last name, last name, and then for the email address, and email address should be required plus unique is underscore unique is the field, and we need to pass in users dot email, like so. And all right, so we need to check. All right, so one more thing, the password is required. So the password and password. All right, so let's check if this form validation is true. If this uh, form underscore validation run. Let me see if I misspelled it. VLADATION. Alright, so if this form validation runs successfully, if this runs successfully, it will return Boolean either true or false. So in case it returns true, then we will need to implement the logic. So if form validation run, then what I need to do is basically get the field names. So the first name is dollar base input get first underscore name, and then the true variable is basically this will filter the input field for any cross site scripting issues. So we are filtering input field twice to make sure everything is clean to go into the database. First name, then last name, email, and password. So let's put the dollar variable. All right, so if everything's successful, so what I need to do is basically echo out, uh, maybe just echo out the first name and the last name and the email address and the password and exit. All right, so let's go ahead, reload the page, like so. Go ahead and type in the John Smith jsmith at mail.com and password. All right, so it's not echoing out anything, and we need to see why this is not working. All right, so it's not get, it's post. We need to uh, say a post. This is a post. All right, so here we are. First name, last name, email address, and the password. So what I need to do is basically create an array and just, all right, so let's copy the columns from here. First name will go the first name, then last name, email, should be the email and the password. Alright, so the password should be um, hash, and inside the hash we have the password, and then the password underscore bcrypt. So we need to encrypt the passwords as well. And one more thing, that it should be the valid email address is underscore email. We also need to pass in the valid email address. So in that case, if this thing works, let's go ahead and all right. So one more thing I prefer to do is basically to have um, create a function which accepts print data and which accepts the string, any kind of string, and just return it um, as the uh, free array. Now what this will do is basically return us the string in an array form. All right, so pre and print underscore r, and there we go. And we also need to remove this from here. And if I just quickly say print data $info and exit, go ahead, reload the page. All right, so first name, email, password should be admin. All right, so it's not working. Let me see what's wrong here. All right, so the issue is with is underscore email. It's basically it's valid underscore email. And one more thing I forgot is basically trim the input fields here. So if there is an empty string, it should automatically trim it. And for the passwords as well. Let's go ahead, reload the page, and there we go. All right, so it says must be a valid hashing algorithm. Password underscore bcrypt. All right, so it's not only hash, it's password underscore hash, like so. Reload the page, and there we go. So we have John Smith, valid email, and this password. All right, so what I need to do is basically just pass this array into our model, and model will do the rest. It will add the this array into the users table. So let's go ahead and learn how we can create models. So inside this application directory, we have models, and to create a new model, let's go ahead and create a PHP class and type in the user model, and it should extend ci underscore model, this one, and just click OK, and we have our model created. So inside the model I will create the function called uh, let's say add, and it will accept the array and $this db insert info, return $this db insert underscore id. So if this value is successfully the values are successfully saved in our database, it will automatically return us the id of the last user. Okay, so let's type in the creates a new user into the database. Alright, so this accepts two parameters. The first one will be the users, and the second will be the info that we need to pass in. Alright, so let's go ahead, and first of all, one more thing, we need to copy these lines and also give this a proper commenting. Creates new users, runs form validations, throws errors, and all right, everything else is good. And what we need to do is basically, all right, so how do we need to load the model inside our controller? So for that we have created the construct method. So it's pretty simple, $this load and model, and just type in the user. So this will automatically load the user model. And what do I need to do is basically I just user underscore id is equals to dollar this user and let's say add. So inside the add, just give this an info. And one more thing is basically if dollar user id is greater than 0. So we need to, if this user ID is greater than 0, then we need to throw the flash message, and plus we need to redirect user or to show him the message and redirect into whatever the page we like. Or else we also need to pass some flash messages or errors, and we need to get those in the front end. Alright, so how do we do that? So for that we need to use the flash messages and dollar this session set underscore flash data, and inside the flash data we need a response, the key, and the value will be user has been created successfully, and just redirect it back, return redirect base underscore url and just the url method. There we go. And if it fails, then what we need to do is basically uh, return it with some kind of error and type in the error, oops, something happened, please try again. Alright, so is this the correct spelling of oops, or maybe this? Alright, and instead of returning it to this, I will just say simply return, so that this throws the older fields to the input fields. So maybe I think so we do not need to. All right, so just return it. And but all right, so we are good to go, and we have already set up our model. All right, so let's go ahead and all right, so first of all, we need to get some messages on top of here. So for that, what we need to do is basically come into our folders directory. Inside the views, I will create. So this is the already directory created errors, and I will create a new directory called uh, hmm, form responses, or maybe responses .php, and inside the php this responses.php I will get all the errors that we are getting either from this form validation field or either from these custom validation errors. And I will quickly paste these lines of code. So it will say if validation errors is not equals to false, then it will throw us the validation errors method. This validation underscore errors function is basically the CodeIgniter framework built-in function, and the rest is basically the error and the response that we have created in our this one. So this is the key that we are getting here for the response if successful, and the error if not successful, we are getting it here. All right, so let's go ahead, reload the page to see everything works. And one more thing, we also need to create a general helper for this. All right, so first let's copy this thing and give this a proper commenting, takes the parameter of string and converts string into readable uh, array. All right, so one more thing I need to do is basically load the view files. So in order to load the view files, I will just copy this function, place it here, and I will say form validations, and we will let the instance remain, and I will just call the load view file view, and the view is inside the errors and what we have responses, like so. And I will say loads the errors file, And for that, what I need to do is basically just call this inside the this one right here. So I will say load form validations. Yeah, form validations. So let's go ahead and check if everything is working correctly. And it says unable to load file responses.php. So why is not working? RESPONCES. Let's go ahead and check if everything is working. All right, so we have an incorrect name. So just refactor it, rename the file, and we are good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and create John Smith, J Smith at um, mail.com, and the password is admin, and it says call to undefined function set underscore flash data. All right, so it's flash, it's not flashed. Oh my gosh. So there are a bunch of errors we are seeing. It should be flash data, reload the page, and the email field must contain only a unique value. All right, so I think so it has already created an account for me. So as it did, let's go ahead and change the email address, password. All right, so user has been created successfully and everything is working perfect. So we have the first name, last name, username, sorry, email, and the password. All right, so what next we need to do is basically log in the user and redirect it to the dashboard. All right, so for that, let's go ahead into the login form, and inside the login form, we need to load uh, the login. All right, so login page, and quickly just do the same form action. We do not need it, and just load the CSRF token plus load the hidden field, hidden action field, and authenticate user, and just load the validation errors and form validations we have. And one more thing is basically the email and the password where we have. All right, so this is the password, and remember we do not need it, just remove this one from here. And for the required, obviously it is required and it should autofocus. For the passwords, it is also required. And one more thing is basically just why don't we set the default values. So echo set underscore value to email. All right, so we have authenticate user, just where we are. Just copy this line of code, paste it here, and just grab this one, paste it here, and let's say process authenticate underscore user. So let's go ahead and create this function, private function authenticate user, and obviously we need to do the same. uh, First of all, let's copy this line of code, paste it here, and we are required the email, valid email, and we are just logging the user, password is required. All right, so if the validation is true, excuse me. All right, so we have the email and we have the password. All right, so how to log in the user? Since we are working with CodeIgniter and we are using the password underscore hash method, so it's pretty easy to use the password underscore hash method to log in user. First of all, what I will do is basically inside the model, I will create a function called authenticate user, and I will pass in the email, uh, email and the password, and remove this array from here, and just get the user here. All right, so inside this method, inside the model, authenticate user, email, and password. Alright, so I will copy and paste the code of the login here, and I will explain you what it does. Alright, so this is the code, and right now what it is doing is that it is basically getting the using the get underscore where from users and based on the email. So we do not need the role and active things, so it is just getting the user basis on the email. If there is any row, then we need to get the row of the user and we need to run the password underscore verify method. So since we are using the password underscore hash for creating the users, and we need to make sure that the password is actually verifying it using the password that we are actually getting from user input and the password that we have inside the database. So if it works, then it will unset the password from the user and it will return the user ID, else it will return the false and return false. All right, so why not we just extract it from here, since this is the user model, and create another model called login, and I will quickly rename this to login and just paste it here and just call this as let's say authenticate user, THENCITATE. All right, so let me see. Oh, AUTHE and TICATE, authenticate user. All right. I think so. I should rename this model to login model, since the login class already exists inside our controllers. So we cannot have two classes with the same name. So we need to rename it to uh, login model, and okay, and everything is working. So let's go ahead, load this controller model inside our constructor function and just call it here. And since we are just returning the user ID, if the user ID is greater than 0, what I need to do is basically set underscore user data. Instead of flash, we need to set the user data and just type in the user ID and just encrypt, or we can just give the user ID to here and just reload it, redirect it back to the dashboard. Let's say here is the dashboard. If everything works, if nothing works, it should say invalid credentials. All right, so hopefully everything should work. One last thing, just comment out it, and what I will say is that authenticate user uh, by email and password. All right, so just go ahead. So we have already created two users, so let me just quickly grab the email address of it and type in the password. All right, so it's working. If I come back, reload the page, and I will just give it the uh, random password, it will obviously throw me an error that oops, invalid credentials, and it will not let me go to the dashboard page. Since we are already logged in and we can access the dashboard, what I need to do is basically, if the user is already logged in, so it should not be able to access the login and register method. So for that, just quickly go to our general functions and check function is user logged in. So what I will need to do is basically get the session values, and on the basis of session to check if the ID of the user exists. If it exists, then throw the boolean variable, return the boolean to true. If not, then return to false. All right, so for that I will just check in if the user data exists, that we have set it up here where it is, this user ID. All right, so I will say if the user ID exists, if it is empty, then return the false method. is user logged in, then return false. If it's empty, else return to true. All right. Or maybe why not we say redirect user if not. All right. So first of all, let's check if it's user logged in. So return true and else return false. And just quickly remove this thing from here. Since this is one line if condition, and say check if user is logged in. Alright, so one more thing, I need to encrypt the user ID so it's not available, it's not easily crackable. So what I need to do is basically let's go ahead and create a new helper function, name it as function encrypt, encrypt underscore string, and it will accept the string return. Alright, so let's first of all call the instance of the code igniter, return $this ci encryption encrypt and string. And to decrypt the string, just simply uh, call this as decrypt, and it will decrypt the string. So just quickly go to here and encrypt string and pass in the user ID. Reload the page to see everything is working. Alright, so it says call to undefined property of encryption. Alright, so we need to load the library of encryption. So for that, what I need to do is basically go to the autoload files, and inside the helper where we are encryption. I'm not sure if this is the library or the general helper function. So let's check it out. Alright, so this is the library and it has automatically encrypted the user ID. Alright, so that's for it now. All right, so one more thing is basically we have created this helper function where we are, this one, where we were saying if is user logged in. So let's go ahead and check if the user is logged in. If is user logged in, if it is, then redirect return redirect. All right, so we need to redirect it back. Uh, if the user is logged in, redirect it to the dashboard. Else do nothing. And one more thing, one more time reload, and it is redirecting the user back to the dashboard. All right. So let's do a recap. So what we did is basically we created the user account right here. Let me just close it. Inside this register method, we created the user account and we passed in the arrays. And once the account is created, we have also applied some form validations. Once the account is created, we are now just running the authenticate method. So once the user is authenticated, it is redirecting it back to the dashboard. And if the user is not logged in, so if the user is logged in, it is redirecting again back to the dashboard, so the user cannot be able to um, the to have access to the login page, create account page, and forgot password page. All right, so that's about it in this video, and I will see you in the next video.